Hello everyone and welcome to our live coverage of Gent Wevelgem as the UCI World Tour descends on Flanders for the Cobbled Classics. This race often favours the sprinters, but there are 10 climbs or Hellingen en route and the weather can be a decisive factor. Last year's race was run in atrocious weather conditions with heavy rain and gale force winds. Today, windy conditions have again made life difficult for the peloton, and that is an ongoing thing which we'll have plenty of time to look at and discuss as the race pans out. This is a race with quite a history, first held in 1934 with some famous names on the roll of honour. 5 riders have won it 3 times, including Eddy Merckx and Rick van Looy, and Tom Bonen there you can see. He is in the field today looking for an all-time record 4th win. Luca Paolini, last year's winner, not here to defend his title. Among those also here though, Peter Sagan, the world champion. Scenes from a little earlier on, the race starting just to the west of Ghent. Frank Costa, the race director, lowering the flag. There we are, the race starting west of Ghent. One of the longest races of the year outside the monuments. Heading west, as I say, towards the coast on flat but exposed roads, then south towards the French border, into France actually. Then they hit the 10 climbs in quick succession between the 144th and the 209th kilometre mark before the final run into Wevelgem. The sting in the tail is the final one, the Kemmelberg, which they tackle from the steepest side. The gradient there at its maximum reaches 23 degrees. Van Avermaet on the left of your picture in the red and black, just working hard, making sure that he stays in the right position, just trying to be more assertive, as Luc Rowe also comes further forward on the right-hand side of the group.
Well, one rider I haven't spotted for some time is Nicky Terpstra, who was in the front group the whole way through this race. Spotted 6 Ethics Quick-Step riders in total. On the right-hand side, we've got Vandenberg, we've got Tom Bonen, we've got Gaviria, who we've seen, Matteo Trentin is there as well. They've certainly got some strength and depth as much as anybody else.
An abundance of riches in this front group from that team.
I haven't seen Terpstra for a while.
Is Finney in the middle of your picture, just disappeared there. Lotto Soudal, a little bit of a regroupment for them, of course, having lost one of their key riders, Jens de Bussero, who crashed out just a few minutes ago.
Oh, there is Terpstra. Yeah, he's in his Dutch national champions kit. I did get a very brief glimpse of him on the right-hand side of the peloton. You can see him there on the right there, number 16 on his back. It's a big fight, isn't it, as they come on towards the foot of these climbs. This really is kind of, I think, where the race will ignite and kick off, and people will find out exactly how good or bad their legs are. The Kemmelberg is a very, very hard climb, whichever way you take it. Harder on the second time up to date. Let's remind you, they're going to go up 2 directions today, the second one being 23% maximum gradient.
That's the sting in the tail with just over 30-odd K to go. We still don't really know about Boasson Hagen, do we? He's looked great so far, but some of the riders who've dropped out of the race, including what looks like half of the AG Desert La Mondiale team, just go wheeling past our window here.
Yeah, I can tell you Nasser Bouhanni was one of the riders who went past our window, so it won't be him that is winning the race today.
Oscar Gatto up there for Tinkoff, among the riders at the pointy end of the peloton. Kinziato moving up on the left of our picture with Van Avermaet right behind him. Yeah, I'm just saying, I think that Van Avermaet has been unwell within the last week. Boasson Hagen as well. They both look good and are clearly feeling good up to now. But in a race of 240k, you're only really going to know in a little while, aren't you, whether you've really got the legs.
I think they're going to know pretty soon. As I said, once they hit the Kemmelberg, you can see that people are starting to get very nervous now. They're jumping up onto the pavements and the bike paths on the side of the road just to make sure that they're in the right position as they turn onto the Kemmelberg. Top of it comes at 71 k's to go, so they're very, very close to it now, and that's why we're seeing the speed so high. Sagan's doing another very good ride. It's you know, we're not spotting him very much, and actually that's
because he's hiding, isn't he?
That's one of the best things that you can do. He's not showing himself. He's not doing too much work near the front. He's not in the wind too much. Yeah, watch out for Peter Sagan.
He's doing well
again.
to hide from view, considering he's got the rainbow jersey on his back. Very difficult to disappear among the jerseys when you're the world champion.
Really hard, the run into the Kemmelberg as well. As you can see, it's already cobbled. Quite smooth cobbles, but cobbled nonetheless, and it's a slight false flat as well as they make their way up to the foot of the Kemmelberg itself, which it gets very steep indeed.
Sagan deciding that the pavement's good enough for him.
Yeah, he's done things very well today, but you have to say that he did play things very well on Friday as well at the E3 Arlbecker until the final 200 metres. Did everything right until that point, and then really mucked up in the final sprint. But they're all making their way up towards the front for this first climb of the Kemmelberg. Bonen's there, Sagan's there, Steijn Vandenberg up towards the front as well. Cancellara is up there, Greg van Avermaet. So we've got a lot of big names right up towards the front of this main group.
This race is shaping up nicely, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the rest of this race.
Boonen's got a good seat there behind Vandenberg. Big, strong rider. Just keep going all day. And Boonen very well positioned. He's on the right-hand side of the road, up at the front. Finney looking very sprightly and full of beans today.
He's just
There's
protecting
Boonen.
Greg van Avermaet at the moment from the winds. Celengi doing exactly the same thing for Sepp van Mark, but none of them look as comfortable as Fabian Cancellara, I have to say.
And just going off the back of the group at the moment is Jonas Rijkaard. Rijkaard, who we saw at the front a little earlier on. Well, he gets himself on telly, whether he's coming out of the peloton at the front or dropping out of the rear end of it. Here we go.
I do love this climb. It's one of my first ever experiences of watching a pro bike race, and my former sponsor John Marshman brought me over to watch Gent Wevelgem, and I remember standing on the side of the Kemmelberg here waiting for the riders to come up. It's a very steep climb. The cobbles are pretty harsh as well. We've still not got much action on the front. No one's really wanting to show their cards at this point in the race. They did a good job of getting themselves into position at the right time, but look at those names at the front. Greg van Avermaet in the red, Taylor Finney just in front of him, also of BMC. Sepp van Mark there in the yellow of Lotto NL Jumbo. We've also got Nizzola that's still doing a fantastic ride. Very strong at the moment for a sprinter is Nizzola from Trek Segafredo, and Cancellara, of course, on the right-hand side of your screens there as well. In the second line, Peter Sagan. Also got Jens Kurkalera from Orica Green Edge in the second line. Steijn Vandenberg on the left-hand side of your screens. So they're all amassed towards the front, but nobody really putting the hammer down just yet.
Let's see how that's just taking the rhythm away from the riders as they head up the climb. But most of the big names all gathered up at the front of the race. Lars back there just dropping off the back of the group. Still fanned out across the road.
This is the steep bit now.
Boonen now starts to push on at the front of the race, picking his own line over the cobbles. Kinziato gritting his teeth there. And the rider just going through from Sky, Michael Goas. 55 for Trek Segafredo was Popovic as well, who's just dropped down, having been on the front for quite a while. Certainly in the kilometres leading up to the climb.
Yeah, this is the new descent which they added in a few years ago for the safety of the riders. They used to just go straight back down the cobbles on the other side, which is, as they will find out later, a 23% gradient, which when wet was extremely dangerous. So the organisers now deviating them off onto this very small road. They take a couple of corners and then they come back down at the foot of the Kemmelberg in a few moments' time. So they've managed to get themselves over that quite safely. They've got the Monteberg to come in just a few kilometres at a time, and then we've got 27 Ks until they hit the Bannerberg for the second time and they come up the Kemmelberg the opposite way with 34 Ks still remaining. So majority of the climbs actually done now. They've got just 3 still remaining, but no big action here at the front. Less than I was expecting, I have to say.
Well, it's windy, but it looks very different to last year. It was a wet, windswept, desolate scene last year when they were coming down this winding descent. 70 Ks still to go in Gent Wevelgem. The whittling down process continues, but a good many of the favourites, the big favourites for the race, still in the running. De Bussera, having crashed out, is out of the race, and Nasser Bouhanni as well, not involved in the race now because we've just seen him go freewheeling past our commentary position.
Well, 3 riders from Etixx Quick-Step now on the front of the bunch. I'm pretty sure they're going to have some crosswinds coming up in a few moments' time, coming from their right-hand shoulders, which is going to make it very, very hard on these small, narrow roads as they leave Kemmel and head out towards the next climb. But you can see Bonen himself.
Bonen's really pressing on here, isn't he? He's got Vandenberg for company and Terpstra, but you can see the wind, the flag fluttering there in the background as Nicky Terpstra now comes to the front for the first time. And, you know, it will do damage, won't it, these sort of conditions?
Yeah, particularly when it's this narrow on the road. And you can see just how strung out that group has been. Not from the climb, they were still pretty close together as they came towards the top. But
that was Czerny there, Dan, who was in the break earlier on, Josef Czerny.
It now seems some splits further down the group, and is that, I was wondering if that was Andre Greipel that I just saw, but you can see it is coming from their left-hand shoulders now, and that impetus from Etixx Quick-Step is starting to put the hurt on some of the other riders. It's by no means flat out yet, but we're starting to see some riders hurting towards the back of this group.
So the Kemmelberg didn't really set anything off among the peloton to any great degree, but the exposed nature of this road really is making life difficult. That's Popovic bringing up the rear there. Benoot in the white glasses out of the saddle. Vandenberg keeping his wits about him. Van Avermaet's about 4th or 5th in line there as well.
Very cagey at the moment, isn't it? As
it
they
is,
head up towards the Monteberg. And as I said, after the descent from that out of Kemmel, they will then have some very exposed roads. But just really highlights once again how important positioning is. So temptation can be, as an inexperienced rider on the Kemmelberg there, when the pace isn't flat out, to be quite happy in 20th or 30th position. And the experience of Etixx Quick-Step really puts the hammer down on the descent and out the other side, and you can find yourself quickly a lot further back than you expected to be.
Sepp van Mark making sure that he takes plenty of food on board, and also reacting very quickly there to what he perceived was an acceleration from Nicky Terpstra. Mitsolo up there too. Taylor Phinney just behind Sepp van Mark. Here we are on the Monteberg with Taylor Phinney. Mitsolo in behind him.
He's looking really good, isn't he, Taylor Phinney? As good
as
I've ever seen him, I think, on these races. When you look at the grimace of Steen Vandenberg, who's incredibly strong in 3rd place there, and Phinney's looking very, very calm as he makes that acceleration on the Monteberg here.
Sepp van Mark seems to have recovered well from that earlier effort in trying to bring the second part of the peloton back to the front of the race. And he too is staying near the front of the group. And tucked in again in the middle is Boasson Hagen. Benoot tends to prefer to ride around the edges of the group. Here he is now, following, is that Trentin?
Yep.
Following Matteo Trentin. Acceleration here from the Etixx Quick-Step rider, and Benoot was very quick to spot that.
Yeah, this is the most stinging attack that I've seen since we got to the climbs from Matteo Trentin, the Italian rider from Etixx Quick-Step in the blue at the front. Quickly, as you said, Simon, followed by Thijs Benoot, the young rider from Lotto Soudal, who was very attentive at that point. There's going to be a big battle between Lotto Soudal and Ethics Quick-Step today. Wherever there's one, there'll be somebody following from the other team.
Plenty of Easter cheer at the side of the road.
Big gap opened up already.
Yeah, this is a marked acceleration here from Trentin.
Yeah, we've got BMC, who've also placed a rider in the form of Daniel Oss.
Done some real damage
group
here.
Of 5, yeah, and big gaps opening up behind, and it's at this point which quite often there can be some confusion because nobody wants to do the work behind. We're not going to see any Ethics Quick-Step riders working. Likewise with BMC, likewise with Trek Segafredo, Tinkoff there as well. I wonder if that's Pavel Brut from Tinkoff that's made his way back into this group. He was a part of the early breakaway this morning, which went fairly early on, so he's done a lot of work already, but I'm pretty sure that that's him in third place there. Refusing to do any work though, which is fair enough given that he's been doing so much already today. But great job he's doing for Tinkoff to mark this group out and mean that Sagan is not on the back foot behind.
Ross now coming to the front and getting stuck in. Benoot once again feeling good today. We talked about changing of the guard in the classics, Dan, earlier on, you know, with Cancellara and Boonen, maybe a last hurrah for them, but Benoot is going to be one of the next generation of whom we'll be talking an awful lot over the next few years, I'm sure.
Interesting little move this, because as I said, I can't see who's going to be doing the chasing in the group behind. Dimension Data are one of the teams who really missed out. They did have 4 riders in that front group as we came on air just a few hours ago, but not managed to get anybody into this small group of 5. Barbosa and Hagen will be behind, stuck in that group, and probably getting increasingly frustrating as he sees the time gap go up. 15 seconds now that they've opened up the gap, and they'll be pretty committed, I would imagine, apart from Pavel Brut at the back. The other 4, I'm pretty sure, and of course Lotto NL Jumbo.
Yeah. But it's a good move in terms of drawing the sting from some of the other teams, isn't it? Because they're going to have to work.
Yeah, it's just another example of where it pays to have numbers in a race like this, when you can send satellite riders or even team leaders such as Thijs Benoot up towards the front in a group, and it forces other teams onto the back foot. We can see Team Lotto NL Jumbo putting Martin Cielinghi on the front to make sure this gap does not get too big. 17 seconds it is at the moment, and they haven't got any climbs for some time now, so they can't afford to sit back at all. It's not until 40 k's to go, 25 kilometres time, that we come to the Bannerberg for the second time, but yeah, 16 seconds, and that could quickly increase if it's just Martin Cielinghi that's doing the work on the front.
Look at the strain on his face there as he tries to close the gap. Straining every sinew in pursuit of those riders on the left-hand side.
You wonder if Tinkoff are going to have to lend their weights to the chase as well. You can't see Pavel Brut lasting particularly long over the final 2 climbs, given that he was in the early breakaway of the day as well. Certainly is excusable for sitting on the back of this group, and I'm sure that all the other riders that knew he was in the first breakaway of the day will not begrudge him that.
But who knows, if this break goes away for a little while, then, you know, he could be handy for Sagan down the road somewhere.
Yeah, you never know. Somebody to bridge across to, but I would imagine in such a long race, 243 kilometres, let's remind you, coming up to 180 k's in their legs already.
Benoot looks quite committed to this, doesn't he?
Yep. Yeah, to take his first pro win. I mean, we've talked him up throughout this programme so far today. Has been a huge talent, and he's got some phenomenal results for a rider of his age, but yet to take that win, and I'm sure he'd dearly love to do it in a race as prestigious as Gent Wevelgem.
Trentin, though, certainly is a real danger, with some big wins on his Palmares. I mentioned earlier in the commentary his 2 stage wins in the Tour de France, winner of Paris Tour as well, stage winner in the Tour of Switzerland, Tour of Britain. Very dangerous rider, the Italian. There's Daniel Oss from BMC, who again, a bit like Ethics really, they've got a multi-pronged attack. They've got a strong-looking team today, as have Trek Segafredo and Giacomo Nizzolo up to the front for them.
Ticking up, isn't it? That time gap between this group and those remaining behind. 25 seconds we saw a few moments ago. As they're really quite committed, these four at the front, aren't they?
The thing is, for somebody like Benoot, he needs to get in a smaller group in a breakaway, doesn't he? There's no way that he'll win if there are too many of them there at the end. So I suppose, you know, he needs to try and find a little group and work with them and hope that at least it sort of gives him a little bit of an opportunity, perhaps.
Yeah, it's his weakness, isn't it, Benoot?
Yeah.
He hasn't got the fastest finish in the world when compared to the likes of Tom Bonen. And you'd have to say that even in this group, you'd be looking at third place, or probably even fourth place really for him, behind the likes of Daniel Oss, who's pretty fast, Trentin, who's won some group sprints at the Tour de France, and Nizzolo, who's a big bunch sprinter. So
Brute's won a few races as well, hasn't he? Not lately. He's in his mid-30s now, but a former stage winner in the Giro d'Italia. And Dimension Data now have decided that they need to join forces with Lotto and El Jumbo to not allow this group to gain too much time.
It's now 4 versus 4. So we've got Daniel Oss up at the front, along with Matteo Trentin. Thijs Benoot there as well, and Nizzolo. They're the only 4 that are working out of the 5-man group. And now behind, we've got 2 riders from Dimension Data, Tyler Farrar and Nick Dougal, along with 2 riders from Lotto NL Jumbo. That's Mike Tjernesen and I was going to say Martin Jalingi, but he's dropped off after doing a huge turn. That's Bram Tankink.
It's not Tankink, isn't it? Yeah. Oh, Boasson Hagen did well to avoid that hedge in the middle of the road that suddenly appeared and veered up at him.
Does put Ethics and Team Trek Segafredo in a very, very strong position with their leaders, though, doesn't it? Not having to do anything here behind. Zdeněk Stybar we haven't mentioned particularly much so far, but he was in the second split as we came on air, about a minute behind the first group for quite a number of kilometres, but he's back up towards the front, and again he's a rider that will be very at home in these short, punchy climbs. He's already taken a very good win at Tirreno Adriatico.
He might
close second to Cancellara in Strade Bianca as well.
He's certainly worth a mention for Tour of Flanders next week, isn't he, Stybar? Well, the pressure's on here, and those teams cannot afford to let those up the road stay there. Lotto and El Jumbo are going to have to lead the chase, just as they did a while ago.
Well, it's down to 3 now at the front. Mike Tjernesen unable to maintain the pace of the chase at the front. So we've just got Nick Dougal, who's doing the ride of the day for me here at the front for Team Dimension Data. On his wheel, the American Tyler Farrar, teammate. And then in third is Bram Tankink, very, very experienced and strong rider.
Boonen just in the middle there, just being sucked along in the middle of that group.
Well, they're doing a pretty good job, but it's over for Nick Dougal, so they're down to 2 now, and this is really going to slow the chase up. It's one of those things when you really put a big effort in on the flat sections. If you just hit a small rise, as they have done here, then you can quickly find yourself just fading towards the back of the group, and they're going to hope to get some help from some other teams here. Katusha have got a few riders in this group. Orica Green Edge have missed out as well, but they don't have any big leaders to really work for, so they're going to have to get just to hope and maybe have a discussion amongst the team cars behind that we need some help to get this group back, because otherwise we're not going to see these 5 again before the finish.
Yeah, there's nowhere to hide on those sort of roads, as that shot just showed once again. Here we are at the front of the race. Trentin, Benoot, Oss, Nizzolo and Brute. Brute's just along for the ride. He's quite happy, tucking in at the back. But Benoot's all business here. He wants to get this thing moving.
They're going to hit a headwind section fairly shortly. With 59 kilometres to go, they come into a place called Meissen, and they will turn right then and head in a kind of south-westerly, which means that they will have the wind pretty much in their faces, which well, who knows what part that will play in this race, whether it will really stump the chase behind or whether they'll start to go much slower in the front as well. But frustrating for Edvald Boasson Hagen. They're sat in third place, not very much he can do really, except hope that Tyler Farrar and Bram Tankink are strong enough to bring this break back on their own.
"21 seconds is the latest we're being told. Benoot and Trentin happy to work with each other here. But still, they are within range for that group behind. think it's Bram Tankink still on the front, giving it absolutely everything he's got. Tyler Farrar right on his wheel, and Boasson Hagen tucked in there. He'll be rather hoping that Tyler Farrar can hang in for as long as possible here, because Nick Dougal, as we saw, just disappeared a couple of minutes ago, having given his best efforts. Cancellara still looks very comfortable. Boonen keeping an eye on Cancellara, just on his shoulder. Terpstra's there, just behind Boonen as well.
This is a really important moment here now, Simon. It's just Tyler Farrar who's doing the work on the front. Bram Tankink, the latest of the Lotto and El Jumbo riders, who is unable to do the work on the front anymore. And if we don't have anybody else joining Tyler Farrar at the front very shortly, that gap is going to go surging upwards.
Constant reminders as the race winds its way through Flanders of some of the terrible things that have happened in this part of the world during the war. Peloton actually just by the Messines Ridge at the moment, strategically very important during the First World War. Scene of fierce battles during the Great War.
Well, it's the right turn that I was talking about a few moments ago, which means they will now be dealing with a headwind for the foreseeable future until, well, for at least 5 kilometres before they get to the next town, take another right-hand turn. And then they'll be making their way back towards the Kemmelberg and the Vandenberg that comes before that, but as expected, that gap has begun to increase.
Farrar just can't do it all on his own. He's going to need some assistance.
Well, it's actually Trek Segafredo who put themselves on the front after Tyler Farrar had decided that he'd had enough of chasing, just to keep the tempo. I mean, I don't think they'll be particularly 100% confident in Nizzolo's chances against the riders that he's with in that break, so it might well be that they just decide to keep it within that 30-second range. Give Cancellara something to bridge across to later on in this race.
Yeah, I just get the impression, I don't know whether you agree, that Trentin is the biggest threat from that group.
Yeah, he's a super talented guy, isn't he? Very fast from a small group as well. He's won a couple of stages in very impressive fashion at the Tour de France. He's very experienced now in the cobbled classics. He's learnt from the best, so he very much knows what he's doing, and it certainly seems like somebody that in any other team would be a team leader for races like this, but given that he's around the likes of Niki Terpstra, Paris-Roubaix winner, and Tom Boonen, who's won these races on multiple occasions, he always plays second or third or even fourth fiddle.
Every time we see Sepp van Mark, he's eating. Still doing that now, stocking up for the last push, and the last 50-odd K.
Well, after those small drags which really hurt the legs of the chasers behind, we've now seen some of the riders coming back up towards the front. So Martin Cilengi is back up there, as is Nick Dougal, who's coming through now. Tyler Farrar just behind that. And,
doesn't look any more comfortable than he did 5 minutes ago, though, does he?
It's going to hurt. And they basically, what they need to do is, even if they don't catch the group back, is just work together enough that they can continue to do the work all the way till the next climbs.
He's done well here, hasn't he, Dougal, to sort of find the strength within himself to come back and to hit the front again, and to just have one big final push to try and close this gap a little bit, because as you can see, it has gone up by about 10 seconds in the last few minutes. Camera clearly foreshortening that considerably.
He's done the ride of the day for me, Nick Dougal, South African young rider, hasn't got a huge deal of experience, or a huge amount of experience in these races. We come up to the second feed zone of the day. 2 feed zones in the longer races of the year, only rarely really in the monuments, and this race as well at 243 kilometres. So a last chance to take on board and put in your pocket some gels, some other bits and pieces to make sure you get through this final part of the race.
So Os on the front, followed by Nizzolo, Benoot, Trentin and Pavel Brut bringing up the rear. It hasn't moved from that spot since they got together. And the gap's just come down a little bit. Of course, they will have lost a little bit of momentum, taking some food on board, but the chase is on once again. And Lotto NL Jumbo tanking Van Arsbroek, and that's Mike Turnison there in second place as well. Turnison seems to have found his second wind. He was loitering at the back of the peloton for quite a few kilometres.
Yeah, he did his turns, didn't he, to try and get the break back as quickly as possible, and then found himself at the back of the bunch. Very talented rider, Mike Turnison.
He's got his second wind, or probably in a race like this, probably his fourth or fifth wind by now, I imagine.
They'll be almost in touching distance now of that front group of 5, given this slightly false flat and the fact that they're into a headwind. They'll be very close in terms of pure distance, and that will give them more motivation behind. They'll want to make sure that they get this break back as quickly as they possibly can. And we saw as we went through the feed zone a few moments ago, they were starting to slow down in the front group there. 14 seconds now the gap, so they're doing a very good job here, the 4 guys that are chasing.
There's the best view as we see the riders just about to curve round to the left-hand side. Rain still staying off, and looking out at the finish here, the clouds are still quite high in the sky, 1 or 2 little patches of blue. That monument we just saw, by the way, the memorial to the missing, has 11,447 British soldiers and South African officers with no known grave who fell to the south of Ypres, their names engraved on that pavilion. But the flags fluttering in the stiff wind. .55k to go, and now the gap is really starting to come down. Benoot will go to the front here and try to press on. He'll hope that Trentin will help him, but it does appear as if that second group are going to reel this dangerous-looking 5-rider lead group back in. Very much got them within their sights here now.
Yeah, they want to try and make contact before they make that right-hand turn. In just a few hundred metres time, they can really almost reach out and touch them at the moment. It is slightly foreshortened with that long camera lens, but they've done a lot of work behind, and if they don't quite manage to make contact, and they've really gone into the red chasing behind them, we might well see it start to gradually go back up again, 1 second at a time. But yeah, you have to wonder then, in hindsight, whether that was a good move from Thijs Benoot. He's put a fair bit of energy into the group here at the front. They've been away for around about 10 kilometres, a little bit more than that in fact now, since they made their initial move, and it does look like it is going to come back together now before the last 2 climbs of this race.
Dougal still doing well, the 23-year-old South African. We've seen him riding in the Dubai Tour and Tour de Langkawi this year, but now in Belgium today. A very prominent role in the race so far. On behalf of his team leader, Edvald Boasson-Hagen, who's trying to win Gent Wevelgem for the 2nd time in his career. Remember, Tom Boonen, a 3-time winner, one of 5 riders to win the race 3 times. Rick van Looy and Eddie Merckx are also riders who've won it 3 times, looking for the all-time record today. His teammate, though, at the moment, Trentin, is the rider up at the front of the race. But it looks as if Benoot is just going to have to desist on this particular occasion. Maybe try his luck a little bit later on if he's got much left. But again, Lotto NL Jumbo have had to do a lot of work here.
They have, but I have to say both they and Dimension Data have done a fantastic job to bring back what was a very strong group, really.
Dangerous, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was extremely dangerous. They were pretty alert. You know, obviously not alert enough to be in the group at the beginning, but didn't take them long to gather themselves together and realise that they didn't have any representation there at the front, and to start the chase behind. That was important, because as soon as it goes over a minute, the motivation for a chase behind dwindles quite drastically. But the fact they never got much more than half a minute meant that they were always motivated behind. As you can see, they're just about now to make contact, with that front group.
And we're going to have a big group back together again at the front of the race. Just over 50k to go. We have just the 2 climbs remaining, the Bannerberg and then the Kemmelberg, the steep side of the Kemmelberg, but they're still a few kilometres away. 12 or 13k away. Back together again, and Boas and Hagen on the left-hand side. Back up to the front of the race, mainly due to the work done by his teammates there, Nick Dougal and Tyler Farrar. A couple of riders from Sky coming up to the front here. I would expect Luke Rowe to be one of them, potentially, but try to have a little look and see who that is.
Yeah, I think it's Golash, the first of the Team Sky riders, in the black and blue there towards the front, and Luke Rowe safely in the wheel just behind him. You can see a massive Ethics Quick-Step riders in line after that.
Sagan's about 12th, right in the middle.
Yeah, we've got another right-hand turn coming up in the very near future.
Hence the scrap for the
road
space.
I think that's what it is. There's as they make this right turn, it will go
and
from
Tyler Farrar there, just bumping shoulders a little bit in the middle of the road. Quite a fight.
Here we go.
They all try and get into the best possible position as the road narrows down, bottlenecks once more. Everybody round safely this time. Remember, it was a similar turn that led to the crash of Jens de Bussera earlier in the race.
We've got an attack from one of the Katusha riders, the first time we've seen them off the front of the group. They have got Michael Morkov in the group behind as well. They haven't got their team leader, let's not forget. Alexander Kristoff not starting this morning. He and Stan are the same as well, not starting, both of them due to illness. But it's actually Luke Rowe behind that's doing some of the work to try and bring the Katusha rider back into the fold. But this is now going to be crosswind from the left-hand shoulders as they go down this very narrow road. So that's why, as you said, Simon, we got that big fight and acceleration from Trek Segafredo to try and get into this part of the race in pole position.
It is starting to look as if we may well have quite a few riders in contention at the finish of this race. It's opened up a little gap here as well.
I'm wondering if it's Alexander Porsev that's up there at the front now for the Katusha squad. I know Jacopo Guarnieri was in the first group as we came on air a couple of hours ago, but Michael Morkov, the Danish rider, is also in the group. In fact, it's Kuznetsov who's found himself alone at the front at the moment. So Katusha got a number of riders in that group behind, so doing pretty well considering that Kristoff didn't start, and Sven-Erik Bistrom retired at the feed zone after around about 80 or 90 kilometres, and no reaction behind from the peloton at the moment.
So Kuznetsov, a former Russian national road race champion, 9th overall in Tour of Qatar at the start of the season. As you can see, opening up a little bit of daylight here, but it's a long road ahead still, 50k to the finish. The peloton do seem to be slowing down quite markedly actually at the moment. So he will be gaining ground almost with every revolution of the pedals here, for the time being at least. Yeah,
much less dangerous, of course, just having one person up the road than...
Well, there's the evidence, the physical evidence of the peloton just easing off at the moment.
Yeah, it's kind of...
in relative terms.
Checkmate at the moment, isn't it, between the big-name riders behind, and that is allowing Kuznetsov to... establish quite a decent lead in quite a short period of time. But Tyler Farrar just...
I'll be thinking, oh great, me again, is it? I'm going to have a go here once more to try and keep this within range, well, having done a lot of work about 10 minutes ago.
It was his choice, wasn't it? He came towards the front and asked if he was going to get any help from anybody else. But I don't think they've got too much to be concerned about with this Katusha rider at the front. It's always amazing just how quickly the time gap comes down once the really good riders start to attack on the climbs. Not that I'm saying that Kuznetsov's not a great rider. He's done very well, of course, to get into this group at all in the first place. Plenty of people haven't. You have just joined us. We saw a large group of riders sail in past the finish line here, where our commentary box is located. Amongst them, most of the AG2R, Agi Desert, La Mondiale squad, as well as Nasser Bouhanni as well. So plenty of people have had an early shower, preparing to go home.
Just looking back there, saw a couple of riders from Direct Energy. Just wondering whether one of them was Brian Coquard.
It is, yeah, I did
Is
notice.
it Genet?
Yeah, Johan Genet and Coquard, the riders from Direct Energy who are in the front group.
Well,
no Sylvain Chavanel, though.
No, but that's dangerous for everybody else if Coquard's still there.
Yeah.
He very nearly won the other day. Of course, not long back from injury, but looking very, very good as Mike Turnison. Well, he did a great job, Mike Turnison, along with Bram Tankink a few minutes ago, and the two riders from Dimension Data, to bring the breakaway group back. That's Van Avermaet up towards the front there in the red and black, about 5th or 6th. World champion Peter Sagan up at the front as well. And Trek Segafredo assuming control of the front of the peloton once more.
It's a great shot, that overhead one, to show you how the dynamics really of even a small group like this, when you've got the wind coming from the left-hand side. You can see people try and shelter on the right-hand side of the group, and what that means, though, is that you quickly find yourself drifting backwards as other riders find space on the left in the wind to skirt round and make their way towards the front. It's a constant fight, it's a constant battle to make sure that you're remaining towards the front, because you can't just sit in on the right-hand side and hope for the best, because you'll soon find yourself at the back of the bunch again.
Kasper de Bois there on towards the back, number 23, and that's Popovic, Jaroslav Popovic, 55. Still think we're going to have a bit more of a whittling down process.
Right, it's not long now.
Run-in.
Yeah, it's not long now, is it? They've only got 8 kilometres now before they will reach the top of the Bannerberg for the second time, before then skirting round to the opposite side of the Kemmelberg, which will be the last climb of the day. But you have to say that once the attacks start flying on those final 2 climbs, and it probably will be on the Kemmelberg that they come, unless Ethics Quickstep manage to somehow miss the move, it's hard to see anybody being able to find strength in numbers within a team to do any chasing from that point in towards the finish.
So Kuznetsov with over half a minute here now all of a sudden. He's been allowed to disappear by the peloton, who are taking the chance to just regroup a little bit, catch their breath before the final 2 climbs of the day, and then the run into Wevelgem, heading in an easterly direction.
Worked out very well, didn't it, for Tinkoff to place Pavel Brut up there at the front in the group of 5. Didn't have to do any work, and it also meant that he didn't have to use up any energy from the likes of Oscar Gatto to send him up the road and cover that attack. So Gatto will be pretty fresh compared to some of the others, and could be very important, I think, for Peter Sagan over the final parts of this race.
Here we are, back with our leader once more. Settling down at around about 39 seconds now, until the acceleration start on the front of the peloton. Nice steady rhythm from Kuznetsov, winner of La Côte Picardie a few years ago. Doesn't have too many big wins to his name, but as I say, he is the former national road race champion of Russia. That was a few years ago, back in 2011. But the big favourites happy to let him go at the moment. But good for Katusha to be players in the race at a fairly late stage in proceedings on a day when their big leader Alexander Kristoff wasn't fit enough to make the start. I mean, psychologically that must have been pretty demoralising for the other riders in the team, one would imagine, because Kristoff, had he been on top form, would have been presumably the #1 favourite for the race, or equal #1 with one or two others.
Yeah, certainly on good form he would have been. We haven't seen the best of him for the last month or so.
He was tremendous in February, wasn't he?
He was, just like last year, and it looked like it was going to be almost a carbon copy really for Alexander Kristoff in 2016 as it was in 2015, where he also started off with a bang and won loads of races in the likes of the Tour of Qatar and the Tour of Oman, but this year he's just gone slightly off the board. He said he didn't feel at his best at Paris-Nice in the middle of March there. He certainly didn't look quite at his best at Milan-San Remo either. In the sprint, you'd normally have had him much closer to the front at the end of that than where he eventually came. But yeah, he is slightly ill, as is Ian Stannard, who also didn't take the start this morning. But Katusha making quite a good show, really, considering that they also haven't got their winner from last year, Italian veteran Luca Paolini, in their ranks anymore. He's still, I think, waiting for a final UCI decision after testing positive for cocaine at the Tour de France last year. So they haven't got their two main guys for these races. So good to see Kuznetsov making a go of it at the front of the race here, almost coming up towards the 1 minute mark as Trek Segafredo still stamp their authority on the group behind. But as I said, they won't be too concerned. It will come down very, very quickly after a solo effort like this, once they really start to ramp things up on the final two climbs.
The Bannerberg is about 5k away from where he is at the moment. So the last two real obstacles on the course still to come, finishing with the Kemmelberg, which is about just a few minutes on from the Bannerberg, those two following each other in quick succession, with 39.5 and 34.2 kilometres to go. So our lone leader enjoying a lead of 3/4 of a minute. But none of the big hitters unduly worried by that. Perfectly happy there in that second group.
Yeah, this is just that final moment once again where you can take a swig on your water bottle and get a final few drinks and gels in. You've seen, as you said, Sepp van Mark almost constantly eating in the last 30 or 40 kilometres after he made that big effort to get the second group across to the front one. But it is a small group. It does make it much easier to position yourself, but we will see a big fight once again because it is that narrow road coming in towards the Bannerberg, which, as you said, Simon, is coming up very quickly now. 4 kilometres until we get to the top, I think, of the Bannerberg at 40 k's to go. And then we are in for a treat. I've been talking about it for a long time now, but they go up the Kemmelberg the opposite way to normal. And they used to descend down it, and anyone that's been into cycling for quite some time will remember them rattling down the cobbles at warp speed on the descent of the Kemmelberg.
Face first sometimes.
Yeah, it was awful. They've taken it out of the race recently, but they'll be going up that. And our colleague here, Dirk, said that it's the hardest climb in Flanders, even harder than the Koppenberg, which we often see riders walk up. So I've been looking forward to it ever since I found out that they were going that way up the Kemmelberg.
Still such a long way to go, though, even when you're at the top of the Kemmelberg second time, isn't it?
It is, but I think once the riders have really made their move and they've attacked over those kind of climbs, it does kind of blow them to the finish, the wind direction today. So pretty much from the foot of the Kemmelberg, after the descent, after this 10th and final climb, they'll be with a monster tailwind pretty much all the way to Ypres until 23 k's to go. And by that point, the breakaway, whoever's in it, will be very much established as they make their way in towards Wevelgem. But yeah, fireworks are going to start fairly soon.
So the lead holding steady at the moment for Kuznetsov. And the hint of a slight increase in pace from the peloton.
I have to say, it's good to see a couple of Movistar riders still in this group. They're a Spanish team, not really known for liking these kinds of races.
No, indeed, and they were a bit thin on the ground in Dwars-door-Vlaanderen on Wednesday. There were only 4 of them at the start. I mean, partly due to obviously what had happened the day before and some of the riders finding it difficult to make their way to Belgium for the race. But yeah, it was a very limited lineup that they were able to put out. Giant Alpecin actually were unable to to put out a core of riders.
Didn't manage to get there at all, did they? But Yasha Sutterlin is one of the riders from the Movistar squad in here, and the other one is Andre Amador. So they've got 2 riders representing that team here in the front group, but you can see them all massing towards the front now as we come in towards this climb the next time round. Nervous riders, you can see the twitching going on. It gets slightly dangerous even in a smaller group like this one.
Luke Rowe making sure that he's up at the front alongside some of the other big names, jostling for position here. Just going out the back is Tyler Farrar, who's certainly put a shift in today. Just off the back of this little group, following in the wheel tracks of Gregory Rast of Trek. There he is, and that's Popovic again off the back. And here we are with the leader once more. He's just eked out a few more seconds. Almost a minute now.
Yeah, that's going to start tumbling pretty well. It is 1 minute and 2 seconds according to the graphic, although that did go up rather quickly, just a few. It's going up very quickly. I don't think that can quite be right at the moment. But yeah, behind the fight to get into this small road will have sped the group behind up. But once again, Cancellara just doesn't look like he's done anything but a walk in the park so far today. Every time we've seen him on our screens, he's looked as calm as I've ever seen him. You have to remember that they've already done over 200 kilometres at this race. 243 is what they're dealing with in all. So they've gone over the 200k mark. And we often talk as journalists, don't we, about the difference between a 200-kilometre race and one that nudges up towards 250 or 260. 243 on the cards today, and that really will tell at this point in the race, particularly given how hard it has been already in the crosswinds up at the coast.
Yeah, what have these riders got left? We're about to find out. Just over 40 kilometres remaining between Kuznetsov there and the finishing line here in Wevelgem. So the lead hovering around a minute at the moment. But the real battle is going to start behind him in the not too distant future.
Yeah, just to remind you, we've got just 6 kilometres between this, the penultimate climb of the day, and the final one up the Kemmelberg. So this is the second time they've actually done this climb, the Bannerberg, and they will take a right turn on this occasion though as they get over the top. Short, quick descent before a left-hand turn takes them towards the other side of the Kemmel, and that's where they'll climb up that 23% gradient.
So Goas there doing a good job for his teammate in riding along the front. You've got the two road captains of Sky really together there, haven't you, with Golas and Luke Rowe, who's assumed that responsibility over the last year or two. Golas, of course, new to the team this year. The feeling he's really feeling that gradient as they make their way up. Boasson Hagen in the middle with the red.
I'm surprised no one's launched an attack at this point again. I think everyone's afraid, aren't they? No one in this peloton has ever raced up the Kemmelberg on the steep side before. Team Sky accelerating ever so slightly over towards the top there. Luke Rowe in second wheel, Edvald Boasson Hagen on his wheel. Interesting to see.
I think Rowe's looking quite good here.
He is, yeah. But interesting to see Brian Cockard looking pretty good at the front there as well in 4th place.
Brian Cockard, he could be a real threat in terms. If he can stay with the leading riders after this. After the Kemmelberg, he's got every chance of winning this race, Cockard. Here we are back with Kuznetsov then, the race leader on the Bannerberg. This is the penultimate climb of the day. Second time up this one.
Yeah, slightly misleading almost, that graphic, isn't it? Just 300 metres long, but they do start climbing quite considerably earlier than that. We saw them going up the climb with everyone across the road, but Team Sky really injecting some pace behind. It hasn't really eaten much, though, into the gap that Kuznetsov has at the front here, but some of the riders,
Tyler Farrar there.
And Tyler Farrar, yeah, just understandably paying for their efforts earlier on in the race, and as I said before, a real whittling down process, but surely it won't be long before we get some real fireworks in this race.
Kuznetsov over the top, still in the lead. Taken a 10-second chunk out of that lead that he had at the bottom so far. Here we go with Goas and Luke Rowe riding on the front. That's Cockard in the middle of your picture in the black and yellow, and Sepp van Mark coming around the outside here. So Sepp van Mark's decided that it's time for fireworks, and Van Mark, who we've seen taking plenty of food on board over the last half an hour or so, has decided that now he really wants to get down to business, and this is quite an acceleration here, albeit on what is a fairly short climb.
Yeah, this is the last of the paved climbs before we get to the cobbled climb, which is the last climb of the day itself. It's one of the BMC riders who's trying to make their way across. I think it might be Quinziato who's acting as a rider to just almost spot this man, and the break. Yeah, it is Quinziato just coming across with the elbows wide. Trek Factory Racing and Ethics Quickstep will want to be quite alert to this as well. The gaps are starting to open up. Good to see Sepp van Mark really putting his mark on the race today, but is slightly earlier than anybody else has gone. He'll be trying to keep that gap until the Kemmelberg starts.
But again, if you're unless you're one of the real fast men, unless you're somebody like Brian Cockard, you really want something to happen now. You need to make something happen, don't you? Sooner rather than later. And this is exactly the sort of move that Sepp van Mark has to make to have any chance.
Yeah, he's
to at least maybe even if he just gets into a little group and has a few others for company, but he's got no chance all the time. There are so many of them there.
No, that's true. I mean, he's got a pretty good sprint from a small group. We saw that when he won the Omloop Het Nieuwsblad ahead of Tom Bonen a couple of years ago. But it's actually
here comes Boas and Hagen.
Yeah, Edvald that's making his way across as well. So Edvald won't have too many teammates left now. He'll have burned the legs off them and chasing down the previous break. So we saw Tyler Farrar going out the back. I'm pretty sure Nick Dougal has as well. And we haven't seen Matt Bramyer either. So I think Edvald has just decided that he can't allow this to go. But you have to say that Trek, Segafredo and Ethics Quickstep surely would have chased this down anyway with such strength in numbers in that group behind.
And Edvald Boas and Hagen now coming across as well, just about to join in. Is that a rider from Trek Segafredo just behind Boas and Hagen? Hopefully we'll have a little look shortly. Road furniture safely negotiated once more. Certainly provoked quite a reaction.
It's Nizzolo again.
It is. No, it's Giacomo
chasing
Nizzolo
back on, and Brian Cockard, the Frenchman from Direct Energy, is the rider just behind that. So
I think Cockard is now really sensing he's got a chance in this race. If he can get over the Kemmelberg within range, he's got a real chance.
Well, he's obviously on some fantastic form, isn't he? Really should have won that race that Debuchere won on last Wednesday at Dwarsdorf Vlaanderen. Just started to raise his arms too early, thinking he got it in the bag, and just got pipped at the line. But you have to be in pretty good form just to get to the finish of that race. Yeah, it might have been a group of 50, but that does mean that 150 riders got dropped. So he's doing very well considering the injury that he had earlier on this season. And as you said, Simon, of all the riders left, he's one of the quickest for sure.
Well, Sepp van Mark has been brought back along with the others, so we still just have the one lone leader and then that group there that we're looking at now. Who can use the Kemmelberg as the launch pad to victory?
Well, it's Taylor Phinney from BMC who's now on the attack, but it is all about to come back together once again. Zico Vatens from Giant Alpecin, the lone rider, in fact, from that team represented in the front group. Mace there from Ethics Quickstep. He was so disappointed, wasn't he, to get dropped from the front group. He was been lucky that it ended up all coming back together again, but still status quo there. No one wants to let anybody go up the road before they hit this Kemmelberg for the final time.
Yeah, so Maasbach up towards the front. Trentin up there again. Daniel Oss for BMC. Taylor Phinney alongside him. Quite a lot of Ethics Quickstep riders beginning to congregate on the front of that group. And indeed, go off the front of the group. Is that Vandenberg?
It is, yeah. Well, let's take our hats off to Kuznetsov as well. I mean, there's quite a serious acceleration there. He's still holding a 37-second gap on the riders behind.
Stein Vandenberg, though, setting off in pursuit. He's so strong, Vandenberg, isn't he? He really is a threat in any sort of race.
Yeah, strong and consistent. He's always up there in these races, isn't he? He's a local lad. I think he lives in Oudenaarde, which is where the Tour of Flanders now finishes. And yeah, he's been very strong the last 3 or 4 years. He's a great rider for Ethics Quickstep to have. He hasn't got any kind of sprint whatsoever, but he's always there or thereabouts. He's always very
fourth
powerful
last year in this race. Those terrible conditions. You can see actually there, look at the trees behind the riders there, just swaying in the wind. It's pretty rough out there. Nothing like last year. But Vandenberg now suddenly finds he's banging his head against the wall a little bit here now, just hanging a few seconds in front of those chasers.
I can tell you another group of riders has just gone past our commentary box, including Andre Greipel, who also is a group that's made their way back early after being dropped fairly early on in the crosswind of this race.
It's just started spitting with rain at the finish here for the first time. It's just started rain. It's been dry all day. So maybe the weather will change out on the road as well in the final 30-odd K of racing.
One other team, along with AG2R, who are going to be very disappointed with their showing today, is the Cannondale squad, who, once again, I will remind you, did start the race this morning, but we haven't seen any of them in the front two groups before they came together.
Do you know, I haven't seen a single jersey of theirs all day.
No.
Disappointing day then for Jonathan Vaught's squad. Sagan still up there, alongside Boonen. Sepp van Mark there in the yellow as well, in the second row of riders in the chase group. I think the Tinkoff rider who's near Sagan is probably going to be Oscar Gatto. Not sure at the moment. And again, the Goash Luke Rowe pairing for Sky.
Let's not forget Arnaud Demar still in this group as well, the Frenchman from FDJ who won Milan-San Remo just
he's been on his own today, hasn't he?
He's been on his own the whole day, yes, but he's very much still there. So along with Coquart, another very fast finisher. Oh, that's how steep the Kemmelberg is on this side.
Crash for one of the race motorbikes there. Hopefully all is well. One of the bikes ended up in a field last year, I remember.
Well, we're almost there, Simon. Here we go. This is the 23% side of the Kemmelberg now. Oh, even more than that.
28.4 maximum percent. No wonder Kuznetsov wanted to make sure they had a little advantage as he went onto the climb. Well, the crowds have waited patiently, but this is the moment they've waited for, as the race is about to make its way up this climb. And here's the chase. Stijn Vandenberg leads the way. He's the second rider on the road. And here we go with Fabian Cancellara looking good. Sepp van Mark in the middle of the road as well. Boonen there just losing a little bit of ground. Demar alongside him in the middle. Sagan looks good as well. They're in the middle of your picture. Van Avermaet on the right out of the saddle, sprinting up the climb. So Cancellara, Sagan, Van Mark, Van Avermaet, and then just a little gap now going back towards Luke Rowe and a few of the others. But this is a really good, strong climb here from Sagan, and Cancellara is the only one who can go with him at the moment.
Great ride from Luke Rowe. It looks like he is going to manage to get back onto the coattails of Zdenek Stibar, who's the Ethics Quick-Step representative here. The Strong coming very much to the fore up that very steep climb. Sepp van Mark there representing Lotto NL Jumbo. Looks like we're going to have a group of 6 coming together very soon. And Luke Rowe, what a ride from him. Really showing once again his progression in these races to be up there with those names.
What a strong little group we've got here, as they make their way down off the top of the climb. It was the acceleration of Sagan, and initially I think from Fabian Cancellara on the right-hand side of the road, and Boasson Hagen.
Yeah, disappointing
not
for
able
him
to follow that. So we found out that just maybe he's still deep down feeling some of the effects of that illness that he's had in the last week. Van Avermaet going very, very strongly though. Be interesting to see what the gap is and whether they're able to gain some ground here.
Well, this one of the back groups now with Martin Chalengi there.
Sorry, Dan, about 12 seconds we're being told. This is the front of the race, Kuznetsov.
Oh, they can't quite bridge the gap across. Well, Sepp van Mark's managed to get there, so we've got 2 groups of 3 now on the road behind Kuznetsov of Katusha. Fabian Cancellara really, really gritting his teeth, but I have to say,
what a classy
Sagan
trio.
looked incredibly impressive on the climb as well, didn't he? Super comfortable all the way up, and Sepp van Mark also doing well, considering he put quite a lot of effort into the penultimate climb of the day, making an attack there. But oh, that gap's opening up, and Ethics Quickstep won't be happy with that. If Zdeněk Štýbar can't get towards that front group, then they're going to have to start doing some serious chasing behind.
Is that Štýbar then who's with Van Avermaet and Rowe?
Yep.
And now they've joined Kuznetsov at the front of the race. So Cancellara, Sagan, Van Mark and Kuznetsov on the front of the race. Little gap back to Greg Van Avermaet, Luke Rowe and Zdeněk Štýbar. There it is. Is it bridgeable?
Well, they're all going to be on their limit after that super steep climb up the Kemmelberg. They will have all gone into the red, and you can see there at Nicky Terpstra is leading what's left of the group behind. It's still quite a sizable group. There will be a number of riders that would love to be coming back up towards the front to try and go for victory today, but it seems like it's a very, very determined breakaway from both Peter Sagan there and Fabian Cancellara. They've put a lot of effort in, and I think they're distancing that group behind.
And the race is really on now, isn't it? It's all or nothing here. Look at the effort etched on the face of Sepp Van Mark. He's had to work hard throughout the race at various points to make sure that he's in with this opportunity now. And Van Avermaet is having to dig in to follow the wheels here. Van Avermaet following Štýbar and Luke Rowe. This is another really impressive ride from Luke Rowe. Cancellara putting the hammer down. But Sagan looked great on that last climb.
Yeah, just as he did on Friday, really, where
he looked great until 300 metres to go against Kwiatkowski, didn't he?
I mean, you have to say that out of the four, Sagan is certainly the fastest on paper, but we've seen it time and time again with Fabian Cancellara that once the clock ticks over 200 kilometres, his sprint doesn't get any slower at all, and he's produced some very good sprints at the end of long races, but you can see that they're really putting as much effort as they can into this at the moment. All three of them grimacing.
Oh, fully committed here, aren't they, all of them? This is it, the race is really on now. All the Hellingen safely negotiated in this year's Gent Wevelgem. Luke Rowe with a little look and a flick of the elbow to Van Avermaet as if to say, come on, it's your turn now. Luke Rowe moves over, Van Avermaet goes to the front.
Well, that gap's opening up, isn't it? 13 seconds we saw a few moments ago, and to me...
Štýbar didn't want to know there when Luke Rowe had a little look at him.
I think that Štýbar is probably now waiting for the group behind. I don't think they're going to catch these four riders at the front now on their own, but they have got some strength in numbers, Ethics Quickstep, in the group behind. They've got Vandenberg, they've got Nicky Terpstra, they've got Tom Bonen, they've got Matteo Trentin, and of course Štýbar himself as well. So the best chance for them now could possibly be just to make a very good chase on the front and try and bring this race back together.
I think Rowe would be frustrated. They couldn't quite get onto the wheels of the other three. So they're just going to wait now for the rest of this group. And then the chase will be on. Nicky Terpstra now comes to the front. Arno de Mar up there as well. Boasson Hagen hoping that he can be dragged back into the forefront of this race.
Well, they're all working. De Mar's working on the front
Boonen's
as well.
there too. Danielos coming through behind Boasson Hagen. There's Boonen's really starting to feel it. No surprise, with only 30 kilometres to go in a race as long as this. And Van Avermaet as well. That grim expression on his face. He'll be frustrated that he wasn't quite able to catch this train here.
Yeah, they were so close, weren't they? I was almost certain that we were going to have a group of 6 and then 7 once they caught the lone leader over the top of the Kemmelberg there, but they just couldn't quite bridge the gap, and that is often where we see Cancellara make the difference, isn't it? Not just on the climbs, but those brutal accelerations that he can make on the flat afterwards. Working
well together, these riders at the front now. Kuznetsov having been joined by the world champion Peter Sagan. Is he finally going to win in the rainbow jersey? Sepp Van Mark and Fabian Cancellara. Cancellara fourth in E3 Harelbeke on Friday, in great form at just the right time. Of course, we're a week away from the Tour of Flanders. But this, as Dan was mentioning earlier on in our broadcast, this is a race that Fabian Cancellara hasn't won. He's won so many, but this is not one of them. Is this an opportunity for him today? 20 seconds the gap.
Well, look at the number of Ethics Quickstep riders. They've been the team with the most representatives in the group for the whole day so far, as soon as it's split up in the crosswinds, but they weren't able to match the power. We talked about this earlier, Simon, didn't we? That Tom Bonen in fantastic form would have been up there with the likes of Cancellara and Sagan as they made their break up the Kemmelberg, but he's just not quite there, and it's put them really on the back foot now. Five riders.
Synetics team time trial, isn't it now?
5 riders rotating through and off, but not making any inroads into the gap that they forged up in front.
Terpstra now riding on the front. The Dutch national champion making way. Trentin doing his turn. And Luke Rowe will just tuck in behind them and hope that maybe another opportunity arises between now and the end of the race. 17 seconds the gap. These the riders at the front. Searing acceleration up the Kemmelberg, up the steep side of the Kemmelberg as well.
Gaviria's in here. I've just seen Gaviria at the back end of this bunch, hovering there. You can see him just making his way back up. What an incredible ride again.
Maybe Tom Bonen's just realised that.
Well,
the way he looked behind there, as if to say...
No, I think they probably knew they would have had it over race radio, but that's why Tom Bonen is also working himself, because I think we're going to get some help as well from Team BMC. But what a sprint we could have lined up. I didn't think we were going to see a big group coming in towards the finish, and of course we might not do with if those 4 at the front manage to stay away right till the end. But if BMC add their weight to the chase as well, then you have to say it would look much better for the group behind.
Meanwhile, this is a good working relationship between these 4 at the moment. Kuznetsov just hanging on to their coattails a little bit.
Yeah, he's done a great ride, hasn't he, Kuznetsov? Yeah. And he's in a great situation too now as well, because he doesn't have to work. You know, the others won't be too upset if he doesn't share his workload on the front of the group, so he can afford to just kind of sit pretty. But they have got that tailwind section that I talked about now. Once they hit Ypres at 23 kilometres to go, that's when they'll make the right turn. They'll be on that for the following 16 kilometres before a slight left. And at that point, they'll be in the direction that they will be taking all the way here to the finish line in Wevelgem itself. But still holding steady at 25 or so seconds, the gap between the first 2 groups.
Arnaud Demar still hanging in at the back end of that group at the moment. Tom Bonen on the front. Staying at about 25 seconds, not budging at the moment. By the way, the rain which had started falling at the finish has desisted now, so the road is a little wet, but it's brightening up again here at the finish. Cancellara on the front. So strong. Really got the bit between his teeth here.
Yeah, he has, and Kuznetsov actually is starting to take turns on the front again now, despite being solo for a number of kilometres before those final 2 climbs of the day.
Well, useful pair of legs, certainly, from the point of view of the other 3, having Kuznetsov there as well. He can chip in.
And they are starting to extend that gap ever so slightly, aren't they? It will demoralise the riders behind that they're chasing flat out and not really bringing this break back at all. Only one of the 4 here has won this race before, and he's on your screen right now. Peter Sagan winning back in 2013. So he's got the possibility to add a second victory in this race. But
I think he won on his own that day, didn't he, in 2013?
Yeah, he tried a wheelie and failed, didn't he? Do you remember?
Well, real quality at the front of this race. And all of them totally committed to making this work. Here are the chasers. BMC not really getting terribly involved. No time to look back, just time to press on with less than 25 kilometres to go. As a few other riders come through the finish in drips and drabs, having turned off.
33 seconds
before the end of the race.
Now the gap between the 2 groups, so it is just increasing ever so slightly as the kilometres tick by. Still quite some way to go, of course, until the finish, 24 Ks or so, but at the moment you have to say it's advantage to these four. They're really digging deep and in full gas, as they say in cycling these days, to make sure that that gap isn't brought down, because at 30 seconds you're almost out of sight at certain points on the road. As soon as it comes under less than 20, that's when the motivation really soars if you're chasing behind. But as long as they can keep it above the 30-second mark, I think it's, as I said, advantage to them.
Race heading through Ypres. Good crowd to cheer the cyclists through, not a lot of room there as they head through the centre of town. And through the Menin Gate. This is starting to look really interesting now. They've got the gap up to just over half a minute. Still a long way to go, of course, but just look at the damage done behind and how hard these riders are having to work to try and just limit the damage here. Try to eat into that lead and begin to bring them back, but at the moment it's not working.
We have to say this would be race over for sure now had Zdenek Stybar, Van Avermaet and Luke Rowe managed to get across to that group. There would be no one really left to chase behind and no need to chase behind in that situation. We have got a couple of the Orica Green Edge riders towards the back of the group as well. One of them is bound to be Jens Kukulera. But it is certainly a select group of riders, what, 20 or so guys behind? But Ethics Quickstep would dearly love to be able to bring this back together for Gaviria, but wouldn't definitely win it, would he, Gaviria? We saw him fade in the sprint last Wednesday in Dwars-Dovlanderen. We've also got Brian Coquard and Arnaud Demar, two French sprinters that are still in that group as well. But at the moment, it's all about these four, fully committed at the front. Fabien Cancellara, number 51 on his back from Trek Segafredo. Number 61 in the yellow is Sepp van Mark. We've got some action behind now.
It will be very interesting to see what Fernando Gaviria has left in his legs at the end of this very long race. Remember, he's a young rider who's been riding on the track recently as well. It's not just been about the road for him. So talented, and this week, of course, his first week of racing on the Belgian roads over the cobbles, and he's taken to it like a duck to water.
He has, and at the very least, you can say he's shown immense promise, as he has done in his entire career so far. But as I said before, didn't expect him to be at the thick end of these races at such a young age with its relative inexperience, really, of the roads. But he's really proving me wrong at the moment. Coming down ever so slightly, 34 seconds now, Simon.
I just got the feeling at the end of that race the other day, the Dwars-Dovlanderen, that because when Van Avermaet had made that breakaway, Nicky Terpstra, who's doing a lot of the work here on the front now, Terpstra was left to drag the rest of the field in pursuit of Van Avermaet, and Gaviria was right on his wheels. So when they caught Van Avermaet with about 300 metres to go, I think Gaviria suddenly found himself at the front earlier than he wanted to be there. Yeah,
I guess that might have been the one place where the inexperience did tell that...
suddenly there was nobody there, because Terpstra had gone absolutely mad in trying to sort of close the gap down. He had nothing left. But anyway, it was good to see him there, and who knows, maybe he'll have a say. But it's gone up a little bit now, as you can see. And this is starting to look very promising for these riders.
Particularly given that the chase behind has really kind of started to break down. We've seen attacks from Grivko of Astana. Looked like Terpstra was also gapping the others, maybe unintentionally, a few moments ago as well. And at that point, when you start to see gaps open up and the flow really drops out of the chase, that's when the speed really drops out, and that's when the gap can open up to the group like this. But always going to be hard, isn't it, to try and chase down Fabien Cancellara, Sepp van Mark and Peter Sagan in full flight in a cobbled classic such as Gent Wevelgem here today, and it's going to nudge over 40 seconds, I'm predicting, in just a few moments' time.
Sepp van Mark, who was second in this race 6 years ago. Sagan, a former winner in 2013. Cancellara, who has never won this race. And Kuznetsov, well, if he could somehow snatch the victory, he would be the unlikeliest winner of all of them, probably, but it would be by far the biggest win of his career.
I wouldn't count him out, though, either.
No.
He's a pretty fast finisher, can be, Kuznetsov.
Meanwhile, the Ethics Quickstep team time trial continues behind, and is that Demar in fourth? Arnaud Demar?
Yep.
With a couple of the Orica Green Edge riders there too. Kukulera, that must be, and Mitch Docker, I think, was the other one who was up there for them. certainly a little while ago, the last time we saw them. Inside the last 20 kilometres now. And it's staying at just over half a minute, the gap between the two. And it will be a wild chase all the way into Wevelgem from here. There's Gaviria in third, with his hands resting on the tops as Terpstra comes through. And Benoot shows his face again for the first time for a little while, having made that attack, or followed Trentin's attack earlier on the climbs. A little breakaway which was reeled back in.
It's one of those strange things in cycling, isn't it, that they can't all get themselves together at the same time. I mean, if you did have the 6 riders from Ethics there, plus the couple from BMC, and Thijs Benoot presumably working for Jurgen Roylants as well, working on the front, it would have been 9 or 10 riders. It makes the chase much easier because you're spending less time on the front, more time recovering in the wheels. But it did break down slightly. It's still now hovering at the 40-second mark. No inroads really have been made at all in the chase so far.
Worked out well for Kuznetsov, though, hasn't it? Having made that breakaway and was allowed to go at the time, suddenly he could hardly have better company in terms of staying away, or the chance of it. Almost
certainly he wouldn't have been in this group had he waited around in the peloton. Sometimes it can really pay to be brave like that and make your move and hope that nobody else follows, and just have a small break, and gap goes up pretty quickly. And now he's been caught, as you said, Simon, by the three strongest guys in the race, and he's still there and in with a chance of winning.
No real encouragement from the clock, is there, for those riders at the moment, despite their best efforts. The gap at the moment is just not coming down.
They've been lucky with the weather, though, haven't they? Look at the clouds there in the distance. We have, as you said, Simon, had a few spits of rain at the finish, but the road is drying up pretty quickly due to the wind. It is a tailwind sprint, I'll remind you. Quite a harsh wind coming down this finishing straight, so could be a long old sprint. You'd have to say that, once again, on paper, Sagan is going to be the fastest of those 4 at the front, but just given what we've seen in this year so far, it's hard to see him winning
in his career, certainly the last couple of years. Tom Boonen still fighting hard for the chance for what would be an all-time record 4th win in this race. And the effort starting to show on the faces of those at the front as well. 100% commitment, but it's paying off up to now.
Great to see Cancellara so up for this race. It's really benefited Gent Wevelgem from moving the Wednesday between Flanders and Roubaix, as it was for many, many years, where lots of the bigger name riders that were hopeful of going on to Roubaix,
didn't it, by quite a few of them?
Either skipped, or riders climbing off halfway through the race, not wanting to being a dangerous race or risk crashing before the final monument for them for the foreseeable future. But now it's slotted into the Sunday before Flanders, a couple of days after the E3 Harelbeker. It's really gained, I think, as a result of that move.
So Sepp van Mark taking his turn at the front. It's not just Peter Sagan who's had many placings that have not been on the top step of the podium in recent times. Certainly in terms of his classics career, that can be said of Sepp van Mark. Yet to really land a big one. 2nd in Paris-Roubaix 3 years ago, then 4th 2 years ago. 2nd here, as we mentioned before, in 2010. 3rd in the Tour of Flanders a couple of years ago as well. But here he is, just tucked in behind Fabian Cancellara. Just clawed 3 or 4 seconds back. Thijs Benoot on the front with Terpstra.
There, we've got a few teams now sharing the work on the front, although BMC appear to have pretty much given up on the chase now. You can see Daniel Larsen and Greg Van Avermaet hovering towards the back. I think, incredibly, that's Pavel Brut, the rider in the luminous yellow of Tinkoff, who was in the early break of 5 at the start of the day. So he's had a long old day in the saddle. Impressive to then make it over in such a small group over the final climbs of the day.
So BMC, do you think, are just happy to let Ethics try and do the work and see what happens?
I think they
then if it happens to come back together, then they'll be a little bit fresher.
Yeah, they probably just feel like they haven't really quite got what it takes to win the race today. A fully fit Greg Van Avermaet, you would have thought, would have made it over in the group that we now see at the front over the Kemmelberg, but that illness that he's had just ever so slightly hindering him, it looks to be today. I'm not sure what the director of the race was trying to point out to the helicopter above at that point.
Clear off, I think.
Yeah, maybe it feels like he's hindering the chase behind.
Boonan's desperate to bridge this gap here, but they are not making inroads at all at the moment. Terpstra now staying at 37 seconds, the gap. Here we are, back with the leaders once more. Still working well together. Halfway now between the final climb and the finishing line, and they haven't lost any ground.
No, if anything, it's increased, hasn't it? It was 15 or 16 seconds as they hit the foot of the descent after the Kemmelberg, and it's gradually gone up in chunks, really, hasn't it? Quickly leapt up to 30 seconds and stayed there for quite some time, and then went up towards 40, and that's where it's remained once again for the last 5 or 6 Ks. I've just been looking through Fabian's best results, in fact, at this race. He got an 11th in his first participation all the way back in 2003, 13 years ago, when he first took the start line in Denza. He had a 4th place a couple of years later, 6th place in 2006, but those have been his best results, and actually more often than not in the recent years he's not finished the race.
Well, he certainly looks as if he's going to finish this one, and finish it in a very good position as well, in that leading group at the moment. 38 seconds is the gap. The chase is still on, but so far a fruitless one for those wearing blue, trying to bring these riders back, as Vyacheslav Kuznetsov just adjusts his shoe slightly, has a little look down. Maximum effort, the pain etched on the faces of those riders. Is Sagan going to land this race for the 2nd time in his career? Or will he just come up short once again? Boonan still absolutely flat out on the front of that peloton.
Yeah, it does seem to have reduced, though, the number of Etixx Quick-Step riders that are working on the front. Not sure whether Matteo Trentin was a part of the group still as they went over the top of the Kemmelberg that time. But yeah, as you said, Simon, the gap is still hovering around that 40-second mark, but there's going to come a point when they're going to be demoralised in this group behind, and I'm sure Patrick Lefevre, the manager of Etixx Quick-Step, is not going to be particularly pleased with this performance, given how many of their riders were in that group, but not really much you can do. If the likes of Cancellara and Sagan really put the hammer down on a climb like the Kemmelberg, sometimes you just haven't got an answer.
Looks like Kukulera as well for Orica, up towards the front of that chasing group, just trying to get involved a little bit. And still the gap grows. Perfectly timed, it would seem, the attack from Cancellara and from Sagan, and Van Mark had the legs to go for it. Kuznetsov earlier in the lead on his own for a little while, managing to stay with this express train. No real sign of it weakening at all at the moment. It does look as if the winner may well come from these 4. Continues to go up.
Yeah, it is the benefit.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? Sorry, Dan, the effort that these riders at the front are putting in. When you look at how hard these riders are racing, they really are going for it, and they're not eating into that lead at all. There's no dent being put into it.
No, it just goes to show the strength that these 3 riders at the front have got on this day. There's an enormous amount of horsepower, isn't there? So even though they're not looking like they're quite as on the edge as some of the people in the chase behind, they're still increasing that gap ever so slightly as the kilometres tick by. But Sepp does seem to be grimacing a little bit more than the others, doesn't he? And it's at this point in the race, when they hear on the radios that they've got 45 seconds, when they come into the last 10 Ks, that's the point at which they'll then be starting to think of how they're going to play things out in the final of the race. You know, Sagan always has that problem that no one wants to bring him to the finish line, so there's no doubt in my mind that one of these riders is going to have to go on the attack to try and get rid of him. And
interesting to see what Van Mark has got left, because he'd be one of those who'd be looking to try and do that, won't he? Sure.
Yeah, I would have thought so, yeah.
To be fair, though, he does always have that expression, doesn't he? He does tend to look as if he's struggling even when he's going well.
Yeah, that's
facially.
true. He's done quite a lot of work as well,
Yeah.
hasn't he? He attacked on the penultimate climb as well as trying to hang on to the coattails of Sagan and Cancellara up the final climb of the day. And he was doing a lot of work, wasn't he, when we came on air all those 3 or so hours ago, because at the time that we started broadcasting today, he was in the second group on the road, or third group with the early breakaway included as well, and they were about a minute behind the group of Cancellara and Sagan, so he had to do a fair bit of work there to make his way across.
It's actually getting quite dark here.
It is, yeah.
Just looking out, seeing whether the heavens are about to open. So this race heading towards its crescendo. These 4 riders looking really good now. Final bit of fluid taken on board there by Sagan. Cancellara just easing off in 3rd place at the moment. Still the chase is on, they haven't given up behind.
No, that's really important that they don't give up as well, because if we do get, let's say, an early attack from this front group with 7 or 8 kilometres to go and it doesn't work for any reason whatsoever, what you can find is that then there's less impetus at the front to really go full throttle and have full commitment, because everyone's wary of when the next attack's coming from, and that's the point at which the speed can really slow. And if you are still committed behind, the gap can go down pretty quickly.
10 to go. Not seeing much of Kuznetsov on the front here, are we?
No, he did start rolling through, which I was surprised about. I think he's got every right to say, I'm going to sit on the back here. He's not a big name rider, and he's also been out on his own for a good 15 or so kilometres before they caught him up. So he's used his energy, and that's a fairly normal thing in cycling then, to just claim that you're tired and just sit on the back and enjoy the ride. But as I said, it's a great position for him to be in.
If indeed you can enjoy it with 230k in the legs.
Yeah.
After a hard day in the office. Niki Terpstra, look at him go there. With Boonen now briefly on the front. Cucalera from Orica Green Edge right behind him. Then it's Giacomo Nizzolo from Trek Segafredo, who's not going to be interested in increasing the pace here. He's merely keeping an eye on things. And Coquard, I think, is struggling to keep the pace of this chase group. You can just see him in the distance there. His head rolling from side to side. As Luke Rowe comes towards the front for Team Sky. And he has, I think that was Greg Van Avermaet on his wheel.
Yeah, it looked like he was about to launch an attack there, Luke Rowe, from what I could see.
Just come down a little bit, the advantage. Full gas here for these riders. This is a gargantuan effort at the front of the race. You just see the chasers behind in the distance.
Yeah, and they'll be able to see the convoy of neutral service cars and camera motorbikes, photographers just behind this group, so they will know that they're obviously just there in front of them, and they'll be getting the gap. Well, if they do get race radio reports or from their sports directors in their ear saying that you've reduced it from 40 seconds down to 32, then they might just get enough of an increased motivation to really press hard on the pedals. But when we last saw them, it did look to be only Terpstra and Boonen and Cucalera who were doing the work on the front.
There's so much on the rivet here, Dan. They're giving everything just to stay in front. It will be hard until right at the end in the last kilometre or so for anybody to make an acceleration from this sort of scenario, won't it?
Yeah, and I think that
because they're just riding so hard anyway.
It wouldn't be beneficial at all for them to start attacking too early, because as you said, then it might well take out the commitment from some of the people in the front group as they're on the back foot, etc., and that could see the time gap tumbling down. So yeah, you're right, I think they're going to continue pressing on well inside the final 5 kilometres, and only in at that point where we maybe might see somebody try to make their move.
Just extending their lead a little bit in the last couple of minutes. It had started to come down. They'd lost about 10 seconds of their advantage, but it's now back up, as you can see. What a fight to the line this is going to be all the way. Nobody giving an inch here in this chase. Van Mark, Cancellara, Sagan, Kuznetsov. Who is about to win this World Tour race? A race that's been running since 1934. It's had some very famous winners over the years, including some real greats of the sport. The likes of Eddie Merckx and Rick Van Looy and Bernard Hinault, as well as Tom Boonen, of course, 3 times. Sagan, a former winner. Can he do it again? Or will Cancellara add it to his very impressive list of victories, covering all manner of events, from the Olympic Games to the World Championships to the Tour de France to the monuments?
Well, it looks like it's going to be between these 4, Simon, doesn't it?
Yep.
That gap now over 50 seconds for the first time since they made their move up the Kemmelberg. I think that chase, the last time we saw it, was very, very fast, but I think it put a few people into the red, and it's probably meant that not as many people are working on the front of the group behind. So they've done a very, very good job here at the front. Kuznetsov now starting to do his turns as well. And this is the point when they can start to think about how they're going to play it in towards the finish. Whether they want to get rid of Sagan.
It really shows you the quality of the riders at the front, though, doesn't it? They've been able to hold off that hungry pack, because they were going for it.
Yeah, they were pretty well organised fairly quickly, weren't they, in the group behind? But the gap just kept on ticking up, 1 second every kilometre or so, and they now see themselves with almost a minute on this group, which is really disintegrating behind.
Is that Boonen still? Tom Boonen still on the front, still going for it.
Jürgen Roelandts.
Jürgen Roelandts there, number 26. Is there to be a late twist? Are they suddenly going to make a late breakthrough? They haven't got much time now.
No, I think it's all over for this group behind. The attacks are starting to fly off the front, and as soon as they get drawn back in, the group slows very much down. Looks like Luke Rose just making a little move. Sarah Martins from I Am Cycling also look to like he might go after him. But for me, it's all about these 4 at the front now.
Van Mark just assessing the situation, taking a step back, as Luke Rowe, as you correctly predicted there, does make a move off the front. And the rider who's following him from Katusha is Jacopo Guarnieri. And Sarah Martins also there in the middle of the threesome, but it's now been reeled back in. But the race for victory is further forward, 3/4 of a minute further forward in front of Luke Rowe. With these riders here, just 5 kilometres to go. Who's going to make a move? When will they make it? How late will they leave it? Who's got the legs? How much of these riders got left in the tank? Is Peter Sagan, the world champion, going to find that yet again when it comes to a finish, when he goes and reaches in, the cupboard's bare once more and he's got nothing left? Has he got the acceleration to win this race? Will Cancellara win it for the first time in his career, the last time that he ever rides it? Or will Sepp Van Mark finally land a classic win? Or will Kuznetsov throw a spanner in the works here?
Yeah, I would not count Kuznetsov out at all. He's, of the 3, had the easiest ride, certainly for the last few kilometres, but he did put that solo effort in before then. But I don't suppose the others are going to be thinking about him as much as they will do themselves, almost. Sepp Van Mark, Peter Sagan, Fabian Cancellara, clearly the biggest names in this break. They all know each other, they all know each other's strengths and weaknesses, and they will all be hatching a plan right about now as to how exactly they're going to go about winning this race.
Another disappointing day for Etixx Quick-Step, just as it was on Friday. Not in the running at the end. The excitement builds at the side of the road, the tension builds out on the road among the 4 at the front. Fruitless chase for those riders behind. Certainly wasn't for the want of trying. And Tiesbenut rides near the back of that group. He'll have to wait for another day and hope for better fortune, maybe in the Tour of Flanders next week.
Yeah, it's been disappointing for the Belgian teams on a whole, really, hasn't it? Ethics Quickstep and Lotto Soudal both missing out on this front group of 4. Represented, we do have Tinkoff, Trek Segafredo, the Dutch team Lotto NL Jumbo, and the Russian team Katusha. Belgians not having their own way in this race, but they do still have an opportunity to win it with Sepp van Mark.
Absolutely, yeah. Belgian rider on the Dutch team. Inside the last 3 kilometres now. Peter Sagan just starting to loiter at the back of this quartet. Van Mark pushing, pressing on once more. And Kuznetsov taking his turn as well in the red of Katusha.
Well, however he finishes at the end of this race out of the 4, he's certainly been the best result he's had in his career so far. Kuznetsov, number 47 there. But as I said, I wouldn't count him out on at least being on the podium if things go the right way for him.
Well, we're looking at the winner of Gent Wevelgem at the moment. Which one of the 4 will it be? Will we end up with a sprint, or will we have a late attack?
I think there's going to be a lot of cat and mouse now in this final 2 kilometres at the front there. We've seen Sepp van Mark not doing his turn for the first time.
Just wonder whether he's just gathering what resources he has left.
Poor old Luke Rowe must be so devastated that they didn't quite manage to get onto the group over the top of the Kemmelberg that's now fighting it out for victory. Same goes for Greg van Avermaet, of course.
Agonisingly close to doing so. Inside the last 2 kilometres now. Peter Sagan is trying to keep his wits about him this time, keeping his eye on everybody else. Momentarily switched off the last time he raced and paid the price. Mikhail Kwiatkowski came around from off his back wheel, and acceleration took him clear to victory. Fabian Cancellara, for the moment, leads the way as the race inches closer towards the finishing line.
They can't afford to slow up too much, even with a K&a-half to go in 45 seconds. You know, the chase is kind of still on behind. No one really knows quite what to do or when to make their move at the moment, but just 1 kilometre remaining now in this race.
There isn't too much room for messing around, is there, among the riders here? Even with the lead that they've got, though, with 1 kilometre to go. Here we go, the big finish then of Gent Wevelgem with Fabian Cancellara on the front. Sepp van Mark sits on his wheel. The world champion, 3rd in line. Vyacheslav Kuznetsov takes his own path. Meantime, the riders behind will be beginning to close that gap. Here they are. Still a long way back, though, as we go into the barriered area. The finish by the steeple in the distance. Cancellara again finding himself on the front. Van Mark happy to just sit there behind him. Little shake of the legs. They're leaving it as late as they possibly can, and Peter Sagan thought about going then. Just feigned to make a move and then didn't, trying to look lively. Determined not to get caught out again. Final few hundred metres, Kuznetsov now sets off and makes the sprint. Just under 6 hours in the saddle. The Russian rider leads the way. Sagan's got work to do, but Peter Sagan now is in second place right behind Kuznetsov, and Sagan's going to come off his wheel right at the end, and Peter Sagan just takes it on the line. For the 2nd time in his career, the world champion now has a victory to his name with the rainbow jersey on his back as the chasing pack come in just seconds behind. They'd built a big enough cushion to take their time with the sprint, It was nervy, it was cat and mouse all the way, and Peter Sagan timed it to perfection. He takes the win, winner in 2013, and now the winner of Gent Wevelgem again for the second time in his career in 2016. And the last world champion to win Gent Wevelgem was the great Rick van Looy back in 1962. So a little bit of cycling history there with Sagan taking the win. Here's the sprint again, Dan.
Yeah, Sagan finally getting his win in the rainbow jersey. What a weight will be lifted off his shoulders with this result. Kuznetsov was the first person to go. He'd lost his nerve slightly early. Thought he might get the jump on the others. Fabian Cancellara was very quickly onto the wheel, but you saw him just sit down there. It obviously didn't quite have the legs, whereas Peter Sagan did. Look at that acceleration as he went past and almost put some daylight between himself and the rise behind. Cancellara missing out on the podium even in the end. Sepp van Mark second for the second time in his career. Kuznetsov did manage to stay on the podium there in third place. But I'm very pleased for Peter Sagan. I've had to ask him a few questions this year about second places. I know it's getting to him. I know it was very frustrating for him to keep answering those same questions. But he's done it. He's done it in a 243-kilometre race and in quite some style as well.
So Sagan even has time to savour the moment. It is one of the great sights, isn't it? When the world champion crosses the line in first place, that rainbow jersey, and perfectly timed this time by Peter Sagan, both in terms of the sprint and, as you can see from the helicopter camera lens, the end of the race as well, as the weather takes a turn for the worse. And there's confirmation of the result. Peter Sagan, the winner. Sepp van Mark just beating Vyacheslav Kuznetsov in the sprint. And Fabian Cancellara missing out. Arnaud Demar, nearly but not quite. Best of the rest on the day.
Yeah, an impressive ride from young Fernando Gaviria, who crossed the line in sixth place just behind Demar, proving that he can still sprint after a long event like this. 243 kilometres this Gent Wevelgem. But yes, you're right, Simon, the organisers will be over the moon that a world champion in the rainbow bands has lifted his arms aloft in victory at their race, and it bodes well for Sagan, doesn't it? Second place the other day at the E3 Harelbeke, first place here today, but the two big ones for Sagan still to come. Tour of Flanders coming up this time next week, and then the Paris-Roubaix just after that.
So there we are, confirmation of the top 10 on the UCI World Tour. Here comes Sepp van Mark, second for the second time in his career in this race. Good ride from the Belgian. But that classic win still eluding him. Here's the winner. And here's the world champion. To rapturous applause. Fair to say, a popular winner here. Peter Sagan wins in the rainbow jersey. And as Peter Sagan starts to celebrate the victory, I do hope you've enjoyed our coverage this afternoon. It was a good race, it was a long race, but we had a very strong group at the end fighting it out, and it was the world champion who prevailed. Hope you've enjoyed it.